in Puerto Rico, right? So you guys got like running water and shit out there. I know the internet kind of is a little bit, comes and goes.
Yeah.
You don't have water problems, in other words, right?
Nope, no water problems. Yeah.
Good.
I think he had worse internet when he was in New York.
Yeah, maybe.
Really? Did you have bad internet in New York? Oh, you did upstate when you were in upstate. That's right.
Yeah, when I was in upstate, it was not bad internet. I don't have my home studio set up, so it didn't have the lighting that I have here. So you can, I don't know if you can see this being reflected.
Oh, you were not looking pretty. You were not looking pretty. You were shy.
Yeah, and I was also not looking pretty. Yeah, I didn't put my makeup on.
Did you shower in New York, or you went full Manhattan style?
No, I didn't take a shower in New York. Yeah, thanks for checking.
Well, VJ, we are super blessed to have your magnetic showered presence here on episode 16 of the BitBrain podcast. What up, guys?
Woo!
Hello.
Do you guys shower in the morning or at night? About showers.
What's up, Mariano?
Showers in the morning or in the night?
Yeah, you go first. You ask the question. You go first. You a morning shower guy, or are you an afternoon or evening one?
I shower at night because I cannot sleep if I'm dirty.
Oh,
I like showering at night and then sleeping clean.
Let's go, Michael.
Nice.
I shower after workout, so usually work out in the morning and then shower after that.
I'm with BJ. Yeah, shower after my cardio workout in the morning. Yeah. But I do sometimes I will take a second one if I'm ultra stinky. Right, I'm sweating throughout the day. In this Phoenix, crazy heat. Even though it's not as bad right now. But yeah, if it gets a little bit crazy, I'm sometimes a 2 shower a day guy. Yeah. So what is up, everybody? How's everybody doing? We got a lot of news going on in the space, right?
Very interesting.
The world hasn't ended yet. We haven't descended into World War III yet. So that's great news, right?
Never stopped.
Never stopped. That's true.
Hopefully,
I think in order for the technical definition of a world war was if more than 4 or 5 countries are at war at the same time, and then
is that what it is?
War. Something like that.
It all have to be the same, right?
World War I and World War II were just names that they were given later after the war, right? So it's more of a historical record. In fact, the first World War was called the Great War. Right? They didn't put it World War I because it's hey, is there a second one coming or something like that?
It makes sense. So only now we're calling it World War III after World War II, obviously, because
for example, in talking about Israel, you have the War of the 7 days. How many days the war is gonna last up until it happens?
Correct. That's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about that. So, the first war, the First World War. What did they call it when it was going on? When they were
quite pessimistic if you think about it, right? Calling it the first one.
Got you. Well, we got our scam pump with crypto this week, right? With a
hey, but in all seriousness, heart goes out to people in Israel and in Gaza for. All the atrocities that are happening. The more that we read in the news, can't believe that all this is happening in 2023. This is war is no laughing matter, and our prayers and heart goes out to those people who are impacted by the war directly and indirectly.
For sure. Well said, VJ. Second that for sure. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, they said nobody hates war more than the people that they are on it. So, fully agree.
Indeed. So we got our scam pump in crypto this week with a Cointelegraph intern that ended up not accidentally, but essentially posting that a Bitcoin ETF was approved or the approval was imminent, and Bitcoin did what it does, which is it went right above $30,000. Now, cryptocurrencies head for a winning week as it's back. back around that price, I believe. Bitcoin tops $30,000 on ETF optimism and a flight to safety. You've got, let's see here. Bitcoin extended its weekly gains on Friday, briefly topping 30 grand at one point for the second time this week, as confidence a spot Bitcoin ETF will soon be greenlit. It grew, and crypto investors continued weighing uncertainty in the US and abroad. The price of the flagship crypto is higher by 2.4% on Friday at 29,000. It's on pace for a 10% weekly gain, which is its best since June 23rd, when it added 17%. So this is good. And I think this is notable as well. The gains come even as the benchmark 10-year Treasury yield briefly topped 5% for the first time in 16 years. So we're seeing a high interest rate environment, and we're seeing Bitcoin perform well in that environment. Higher yields historically have had a negative effect on Bitcoin, but the crypto asset is benefiting from a key catalyst. Investors have been watching all year the approval of what would be the first spot Bitcoin ETF in the US. Earlier this week, JP Morgan said the SEC is likely to approve an ETF in the next few months. Mike Novogratz, whose Galaxy Digital has an ETF application with the SEC in partnership with Invesco, told CNBC he thinks it could happen as soon as the end of the year. Woo! All right. Well, I know we've been monitoring closely. Yeah. What do you say about this, Mariano?
It's right around the corner.
Yeah. What does right around the corner mean to you, my friend?
So I just find it very, very interesting that the market is so expecting the Bitcoin ETF from happening, right? So we have one fake news and the market pumped, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Imagine the power it has, the Fed, to move and manipulate and sort of like move the Bitcoin price upwards if it gets accepted. It's phenomenal. I never seen the crypto market and the Bitcoin market so expecting of regulation or expecting of an approval of something. Even when the Bitcoin futures were approved, it was a big deal, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Like it was important, but this is on another scale. So definitely, I think that the Bitcoin market definitely is pricing the approval. It's going to be fun.
Roger that. What do you think, VJ? Michael?
So there is a lot of pent-up demand of cash that is waiting on the sideline, right? The moment that we had a news that the Bitcoin ETF is approved, it jumps 10% because all of this cash is sitting on that sideline just waiting for clear regulations. Once we have clear regulations and regulation clarity is coming, we talked about FIT 21, which is the regulatory clarity that the Congress is pushing through. Again, we don't know if it's going to get passed or not. And crypto is a new asset class, and it needs to have fundamental regulations built from the ground up, not based on some archaic 1934 Investment Company Act or the 1940s Act, right? All of this are rules, and currently crypto doesn't have clear regulations, and it's being litigated in courts. The SEC is suing them. We currently don't have clarity. So once we have regulatory clarity around the digital assets, around the use of crypto, this is a market that is not going to go away. This market is not going to die. There are many skeptics who are out there who think that the government is going to come and over-regulate this and make it illegal. It's not going to happen, right? They're going to regulate it so that you can have some clarity for businesses that are operating legally in the space. And the 10% jump in price within an hour is just the pent-up demand, all this money that is sitting on the sideline for regulatory clarity. Now, that is with the amount of money that is just sitting on the sideline, and it was maybe like in the order of less than, I would say, maybe $10 or $30 million. About $300 million of short positions got liquidated when the increase in price of 10%, and then it fell back when it later on turned out that it was a fake news. So once the Bitcoin ETF gets approved, and again, it's guaranteed, right, to get approved. We don't know when it's going to get approved, right? It might take like a month, 10 months, 10 years, but hopefully not 10 years. Definitely, I think that less than 5 years, we're going to have a Bitcoin ETF approved. When that happens, the estimate is anywhere from $5 to $50 billion of money that is sitting on the sideline. And imagine if the price moves up by 10% just with like $30 million of money coming in. If 5 billion comes in, imagine what's going to happen to the price of Bitcoin. So that is my take on it. Yes, there is a lot of money that is just waiting on the sideline, that is waiting for clarity to come into the space.
Yeah, and that 50 billion is just a small percent. Imagine if people get even more optimistic about Bitcoin or get more reasons to get in. That number could turn into $1 trillion really quickly. And I think that combined with the fact that there's barely any Bitcoin on exchanges really will lead to Bitcoin going pretty quick near 100K or more. So put your seatbelts on.
You bring up a good point there, Michael. I was actually want to hand this back to BJ, but BJ, have you been looking at on-chain data lately and seeing where are we at as far as the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges? Is it closer to a low, or is it closer to a high, or is it just kind of average at this moment in time?
So we do look at on-chain data. There are two aspects to the on-chain data. One is the long-term holders, and the other is the short-term holder. And long-term holders are defined as people who hold Bitcoin for more than 155 days. Why 155 days? Because statistically speaking, historical record, once people hold Bitcoin for 155 days, and we can track it because the data for when a coin entered a particular wallet is available on the blockchain. If they hold it for more than 155 days, then they hold it for a long period of time. If they hold it for less than 155 days, then there might be a probability that they would just sell it after some time, right? They are Bitcoin tourists. They just want to test it out. They make some profit, or they have a loss, and then they are gone. Now, for the data for people who are holding Bitcoin, the long-term holders, is at an all-time high right now. So the long-term holders at an all-time high. Short-term holders is not at an all-time low, but it's closer to the bottom. And we have roughly about, I think if I remember correctly, about 12 million Bitcoin or so. It's being held by long-term holders. And we maybe have about 2.9 million Bitcoins that is held by short-term holders. And the 2.9 million Bitcoin, probably only maybe about 10 to 20% of them are actively traded on a daily basis. And that is like around 300,000 to 600,000 Bitcoins. And those 300 to 600,000 Bitcoin will vanish right away if the Bitcoin price doubles, which is why we see this when Bitcoin moves, there is a squeeze that happens and it jumps 5, 6, 10% on a daily basis. That is why this asset is pretty unique compared to any other assets that we have seen before.
That's what's interesting about what you just said there is that we've effectively rinsed out a lot of the short-term holders, right? So now it's mainly a long-term holder game that's really got the bulk of the Bitcoin out there. And now you've got a lack of really open interest in the market right now. So a catalyst like this coming out and moving the market 10% in a day, that's why we saw what we saw, even when it was a fake story. So what's it going to be when it's a legitimate story? So it's going to be very exciting. I think it's going to be a seminal moment in crypto. So I'm personally excited for it. But let's move on to the next story, which is Powell. Jay Powell actually spoke this week, and he says that inflation is still too high and lower economic growth is likely needed to bring it down. So, and I know that we get a little feedback there. Something's phone. Yeah, I think that really, this is another, Powell, what he's been trying to do this whole rate hiking cycle is just to kind of stymie demand, right? Stock market kind of collapse the stock market a little bit so that we can stymie inflation a little bit so that he doesn't have to keep raising rates. So what do you make of his comments, guys? BJ, you have any comments on it? No, not so much.
Speaking from experience, I mean, if you want to lower inflation, if you want to lower, sorry, I had a 2-second delay. I didn't hear. Sorry. So I don't know, not an expert in the matter, but speaking from experience, if you want to lower inflation, maybe you should like stop printing money. And I was watching the other day like how insanely expensive the 10-year like Treasury bills have become now, and how much do they paid. So I don't know. I think that could be a start.
Yeah, I agree. 101% with you, Mariano, that maybe we should print less money. So what I'm curious about is there an environment where we have continued sustained inflation and we have Bitcoin and cryptocurrency growing as a market, as an industry? So you're kind of seeing that a little bit. We've had inflation. We have disinflation now. Most people are calling it, which is essentially a declining rate of inflation, but it's still inflation nonetheless. So it's like going from 6% to 5% to 3% to 4% or 4% to 3%. So that's a declining rate of inflation, but it's still inflation. So prices are still going up, and the prices at the pump, prices of food, the shelter, all that stuff, it's still going up. It's just going up at a declining rate. So do we continue to have an environment where crypto? Now I understand that Bitcoin, we just talked about, it's got a catalyst behind it. It's this idea that the SEC is inevitably going to improve this ETF, and all this money sitting on the sidelines is going to come in. But in absence of that, do we even see an environment where Bitcoin and other cryptos can rise in a high inflationary environment? Because I know that we've always been thinking that, we have to wait for the Fed pivot. The Fed's got to pivot. They got to start lowering rates and turn on the money printers, and then our huge crypto boom is underway. But could we be seeing an environment where we see higher inflation, a rate hiking cycle still, and crypto coming back from the dead and moving into more of a bull market? What do you guys think about that?
So the Fed has raised the interest rate at the steepest rate ever in history, right? And despite that, the labor market is not easing up, right? We still have a record low unemployment rate, and that is very confusing. Even if you watch Powell's speech, he talks about they don't know, right? They're increasing the interest rate. The Fed has two controls, right? They can either print more money, or they can do something with the interest rate. Those are the two levers that they have to control this entire complex world economy. And a lot of economists are confused, right? The Fed has an estimated 150 PhDs in economics who are working and looking at the data, and even they are confused, right? The interest rate is increasing, but unemployment is not decreasing at all, right? So that also has an impact on inflation, because the traditional theory is that you increase interest rate, it makes it harder for businesses to borrow money. Because it's harder for businesses to borrow money, they are not expanding and growing. Because of that, they're going to let go of some employees, and that's going to increase the amount of unemployed people. And because there are a lot of unemployed people, there is not enough money circulating in the market, and businesses have to lower their price because now their products are not getting sold. Whereas interest rate is increasing and unemployment is decreasing. The Fed is confused as to what needs to happen, because traditionally, if you are turning a ship, right? The ship is a great metaphor. If you are turning a ship, and what happens is that there is like this moment of catch. If you are sailing a sailboat, you will feel it. You can feel the boat turning. If you are guiding the sails correctly, right, you feel the power of the wind moving the sail. But if you turn the ship too quickly, then the sails doesn't catch the wind, and you don't have the sense of the wind pushing because you have oversteered. Now, has the Fed oversteered? In my opinion, yes. But we are going to see the impact, right? The Fed is a giant ship, and you cannot turn it like a sports car. You're going to see the impact of it. And at the same time, the Fed is confused as to why their control is not working. And how does it impact with Bitcoin? Yes, there might be a temporary way in which the Bitcoin price is moving, similar to what's happening with the overall economy, is that yes, like it's proceeding in the direction that is opposite of what the Fed is intending, and it is going to have an impact. We'll have to wait and see.
Appreciate that. And you guys, Mariano, Michael, any insight or comments on this?
Nothing else to add.
Yeah, I just think it'll cause people to at least hedge a little bit into Bitcoin. So it's a contributing factor to the price going up.
I agree. So next topic is Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, says U.S. can simultaneously support in Israel and Ukraine war aims. That's interesting. I thought we were bankrupt, but maybe not. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the U.S. can afford supporting two countries, Israel and Ukraine, simultaneously. According to the U.S. Treasury, Yellen was, when asked by Wilfred Frost, a reporter at UK broadcaster Sky News, about the ability to afford aid, given the weakest fiscal position since World War II. Yeah, I think that that's a pretty good assessment. Can America or can the West afford another war at this time? Yellen, I think answer is absolutely. America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and support Israel's military needs, and we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. Look, the American economy is doing extremely well. Inflation has been high, and it has been a concern for households. It has come down considerably. At the same time, we have about the strongest labor market we have seen in 50 years, with 3.8% unemployment. All right, guys, what do you make of this comment from our esteemed Treasury Secretary?
I think that's very confident view.
That's a very what view, Michael?
Very confident view.
I agree.
That they can take on two wars. Maybe she's just being optimistic, but maybe she knows something everybody else doesn't.
So, I mean, from an economical point of view, I don't know exactly what was the number that of value that the United States submitted for in assistance. I don't think it makes that much of a difference to the balance of the United States. Of course, it sounds bad, right? Because it's like, hey, you have a country that, you have inflation, you have poverty, you cannot just give money to other countries to fight their wars. Like, why don't you leave them alone? Now, from a political point of view, I mean, it's a little controversial because the situations are different between Israel and Gaza and Ukraine and Russia. So, like, the global world would agree that Ukraine is defending its territory, and that might be the case also for Israel. But it would also be interesting to analyze what are the Israel's further plans with Gaza, because there's also a growing concern that there will be, in a way, like a huge genocide happening, if maybe perpetrated by the weapons that the United States gave Israel. And I know this is like a difficult subject to touch, but I don't know. Those are my points.
Yeah, I think those are good points, Mariano, and I think it's important for all of us to just acknowledge too that we, none of us are geopolitical experts, right? So we're not commenting on this as experts in geopolitics or experts in these wars by any means. I think what is maybe kind of part and parcel of this article anyhow is that, can we afford it? Not necessarily do we have a moral obligation to do it, or should we support them? I think it's easy to find those answers to, should you support your allies? Of course, you should support your allies. However, when you're putting, when you're unable to make your rent, and when you're, deficit spending, and you're having to, save your neighbor by putting it on a credit card, I think that's a separate matter, right? I think the U.S.'s financial house is not strong. Like he said, a weakest fiscal position since World War II. And you can debate different metrics, things like that. You can look at unemployment. You can look at all these different things. But overall, I think you can also argue is that we are reaching a very tenuous position from a debt standpoint, that if we're not very careful, we could, as the United States, could put ourselves in even more of a strenuous fiscal position thereby being weakened. So I just personally, I'm a little bit reticent to be, sending a few billion here, a few billion there, a few billion here, a few billion there, with many of the domestic issues that we still have in this country. So that would be my point. Is I would kind of, but I'm in no means to be. I'm not a Treasury Secretary or anything like that, but I do have an opinion on the matter, and the opinion is that if you have this belief that we can just continue to send aid overseas, there's going to be a limit to how much you can. In other words, that's going to come home to roost at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not immediately, but it's down the road, and there are unintended consequences to that. So that's my view.
Yeah. So let's go back and look at the simple economic theory, right? Again, I'm not an economist, but if you look at what has happened and historically to understand what's happening now, right? Say you have two kingdoms that are fighting, that are in war, and one of the kingdom looks like it's about to lose the war, right? And this is based on olden days where you had like solid money, right? Where you had very hard money like gold being able to run through the economy. If you have two kingdoms that are at war and one of the kingdom looks like it's about to lose, then what is the natural course of action in a hard money economy, right? What do you think is going to happen? Most people would say, hey, like the king would then figure out a way to broker a peace treaty of the losing kingdom, because they want to preserve the assets that they have, right? If the government runs out of money, if they don't have any gold to pay the soldiers, what will the soldiers do, right? The soldiers are not getting paid to be in war, and they're going to lay down the weapon and they're going to go find some other place, right? Maybe they are refugee, they go to another country, some other place where they can be in peace and have the economy running. And typically what happens is that you have an aggressor and a defender, right? If some country is invading another country, the country that is defending, there is a lot of support for people. The businesses would be like, hey, why is this other country attacking us? We want to defend. So businesses, they want to go about their job, and hence they would support the war, but not supporting war, supporting an end to the war to get to peace, because they can then do the business and be able to provide valuable services. And if an aggressor comes in, there is not much support from the country. If they are running out of money, if they are aggressive doing a campaign at another country, they'll be like, hey, like, no, why are we fighting a war, funding some other war that's happening somewhere else? So typically, wars don't last for long, because if the government runs out of money, there is no way to pay their soldiers, and hence a war would come to an end, right? The soldiers would lay down the arm. But when we started switching over to fiat money, where gold or hard money was no longer money, it was all paper money, then what happens is that the government, if you have someone who has a very big ego like a Hitler, they're going to start printing more and more money to pay the soldiers, but it's an indirect tax, right? That's what causes inflation, is they are using the resource of the entire country. It's no longer how much the money that the government has in the treasury, it is how much money the government has with all of their resources combined, everything from bread to milk, because they can print more money, and the soldiers now are getting paid not in gold but in fiat money, which can then be used for, say, buying a loaf of bread or milk. And if the government is printing more and more money, guess what's going to happen to the price of bread and milk? They're going to increase, right? So indirectly, the government is using the resources of the entire country to fund the war, not just the money that they have in the treasury. That is what is happening right now, is we don't have money in the treasury. And in United States, healthcare used to be the number one expense, 20% of the GDP. Now, debt repayment is the number one expense, right? Imagine you have a household where the number one expense is your credit card expense or the other debt expense. And that's where United States is right now. And Mariana, you asked, you weren't sure about the amount of funding. I think Joe Biden is asking for $105 billion of money from Congress, out of which $60 billion is going to go to Ukraine, and another $10 billion or so is going to go to Hamas. I'm sorry, for Israel to fight the Hamas war. and another 10 billion or so is for the Mexico border wall. So we are essentially taking every resource that we have. It's the amount of money that we are paying for the resources, including real estate, including a loaf of bread and milk, and printing that to be able to finance this war, which is a recipe for disaster. And I don't think it's going to have enough support for us to be able to pass such a law to print more money, right? During coronavirus time, something different happened. It's like a global pandemic, and we said, hey, like, no, we're going to turn on the money printer. It had support from everyone because no one knew what was happening. But in this case, it's not at the same level. It's not printing $4 trillion of new money. It's still going to be printing $100 billion of new money, which is a small drop compared to how much debt that we have. And at the same time, I doubt it's going to have the support from both sides of the government.
Yeah, that's thank you for putting that in context, Vijay. I appreciate that. It's small in context to the amount of debt that we have. But I did see a figure, something that the amount of money printing or the amount of debt creation is accelerating. Like it was some obscene number in the tens of billions of dollars, like per day, that is being added to the United States debt. So it almost feels like that we are, I've cited Ray Dalio's, long-term debt cycle thesis before. It feels like we're getting very in the final innings of a long-term debt cycle, where it's like, first you got the guy, he goes and gets his teeth removed, and then or wisdom teeth removed, and then he's put on painkillers, right? Ordinarily, he just needs a few just to get him by, right? And then all of a sudden he develops an addiction. And in this case, the United States has got a debt addiction. And, you use it maybe you get high every once or twice a day. Now it's 2 or 3 times a day. Now it's every hour. Now it's heroin. Now it's, now you're at risk of ODing. And I kind of feel like that's what's going on with the United States and its debt, is the amount of debt that is being created is at such an accelerated path that not only can we not get off of it, but I don't even think we can slow the train down. And it feels like nobody politically is interested in slowing the train down, whether it's in the area of healthcare, whether it's in the area of military industrial complex, whether it's in the area of financing or just, bond issuance, and then, issuing more debt, and then, those interest payments. So it's really a unfortunate thing, because we have someone on the podcast here who hails from an area of the world that's going through the consequences of a lot of money printing, and that's Mariano. So it's like now you see, what's the political kind of upheaval that's going on in Argentina from this. So my concern is that we've kind of lost sight from a leadership perspective, that I think we feel like we just have this blank checkbook that we can just bust out at any time, and we can be the arbiters of the world, and we can spend a few billion here and a few billion there, but we're not fiscally, I should say, we're not fiscally honorable, or we're not fiscally, paying close attention. We're not balancing any budget whatsoever. And so these are some of the concerns that I have, especially when I see the Treasury Secretary say, "Oh yeah, we can finance 2 wars." Okay, well, can we finance 3? Can we finance 4? How deeply can we do it? Because we just got out of the Middle East after a 2 decades long war. We're going to go back for another 2 decades. So these are some of the concerns that I have.
Yep, fully agree.
Else does.
Pretty concerning.
So, but in the area of crypto, right, we actually have, I know we talked about last week where there was an article talking about people were utilizing, or Hamas was raising money through crypto. I think it was like some obscenely low number, like a couple $1,000s. But now we've seen on the opposite side of this that a charity campaign, Crypto Aid Israel, has distributed funds to 4 organizations that have been raised through crypto. So a charity campaign launched earlier this month has already raised 185 grand since the launch. It's great. The aid effort announced it received support from firms such as KPMG, Zengo, Wonderland, and I'm not sure the name of this, so I'm not going to say it. According to a press release, KPMG is providing assistance with fundraising and distributions. portion of the funds were distributed to 4 organizations: Zaka, Foundation for Advancing Citizens of Eskol Regional Council, Lev Ashad by Or Hanagov. I'm not going to try to pronounce the other ones. It's not my language. The organizations provide a variety of services from medical equipment to hygiene and food provisions. So this is actually a feel-good story. I kind of like this, that, you know, where this is what blockchain, this is what crypto is all about, is actually, you know, being able to use it as a force for good. So what do you guys think about this?
It was one of, I remember, I think it was on the video of We Use Coins. You know, that's the oldest like Bitcoin video. I think Michael knows it very well. That one of the main advantages of Bitcoin, you know, since you cannot censor it, since it's a way for you to send money like abroad with no fees or minimal fees, but no restrictions. That was like charity was like the main thing for Bitcoin, I think, or one of the main like arguments for Bitcoin, right? The capacity that you have to receive money from some people, from any people in any part of the world. I think it's huge. So I'm very happy that it's being used for great reasons, right? That and it shows you, right? It's the technology is not inherently good or inherently bad. The technology is just a technology. It's what you use it for what really makes it good or bad, right? So with Bitcoin, you can send money to a terrorist organization, or you can send money for refugees. It's your choice, right? It's always the person that is deciding. The same with, or just have one here, like the same with the US dollar, right? The US dollar is not inherently good or bad, yet, you know, like the most terrorist organizations, they're funded with with $100 bills, with US dollars. And at the same time, amazing charities are funded with dollars. So it's not. I think it's not about the technology of Bitcoin. It's more about the use case we do it.
Yeah, at least with Bitcoin, you're able to track where it goes. So when someone funds a terrorist organization, then you know, they can potentially get in trouble with that as well. With the dollar, you don't have any sort of tracing, or it's at least a little bit harder to trace. But also, yeah, it makes me think of like the Jamaican bobsled team back in the day that got funded to go to the Olympics. You know, people just were able to send money, and seeing that charity event happen just, I think, excited everybody. So it's good to see this continue to happen.
No question. I completely agree. That's a really good point you bring up there, Mariano, is that it's really the intent. That's what we need to focus on. We need to focus less on the fact that, okay, is it being used for bad or good, right? And it just grabs the headlines, and it's just used for opponents to smear a certain technology that they don't like, right? And it's not necessarily that it's being used for terrorism. It's just that, I mean, so too is everything. You know, dollars are being used for terrorism, euros are being used for terrorism, right? So, but they're also being used for good. So I think we have to really kind of take the context behind what we're being told through the media. So next story, want to cover this. This is a very interesting.
Hey, before we move on, can I address one more point on the previous story?
Go for it.
Is earlier this year, $6 billion were paid right now, of frozen funds were released by the US government to Iran. And there was a prisoner exchange deal. 5 American prisoners, hostages that were held in Iran were released for 5 Iranians who were held in the US jail, plus another $6 billion of assets that were frozen were released back to Iran. It's not like a ransom payment as such, but it looks like a ransom payment. So like $6 billion, right? So it's like almost 1.25 billion per prisoner. And that money was used by Iran to fund some of these Hamas terrorists. So you can never, going back to Mariano's point, is it good or bad, right? The money circulates, and the money has a tendency to circulate. It could be used for good purposes to help people who are being impacted by war. And it also can be used to finance the war to begin with. Money itself is neutral. Technology itself is neutral. How humans use it can impact whether we use it for a good purpose, for uplifting humanity, uplifting the global world, or for bringing others down and to cause more suffering and pain.
Great point, DJ. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad that you brought that to our listeners' attention. So next story is regarding Barry Silver. Gemini, Genesis, and Digital Currency Group have all been sued by the New York Attorney General for allegedly defrauding investors of $1 billion. So 1/6 of what Iran got, you know. So the lawsuit alleges Gemini knew Genesis loans were undersecured and at one point highly concentrated with SBF's Alameda research, but did not reveal this information to investors. Whoopsies, small detail. New York Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit on Thursday against crypto companies Gemini Trust, Genesis Global Capital, and DCG for allegedly defrauding more than 238,000 investors, including at least 29,000 New Yorkers, of more than $1 billion. James is seeking to ban Gemini, Genesis, and DCG from financial investment industry in New York. That's actually a pretty big deal. Gemini lent funds to Genesis, which is owned by DCG. Now this gets complex because this whole thing that went on with Gemini and Genesis is, and they're all owned by essentially the kind of the same person, Barry Silver. Gemini lent funds to Genesis, which is owned by DCG, all part of the same kind of trifecta. As part of its EARN program, the suit said. The funds were later sent to counterparties such as trading firms Three Arrows Capital, which went bankrupt, and Alameda Research, which they both went bankrupt. So this left
record.
Yeah, they both went bankrupt. This left Genesis with a $1.1 billion hole, and DCG also owns CoinDesk, which is being which is the one publishing this. So what do you think of this messed up soup here? Looks like Barry's going to be paying some attorneys for a while.
So if you look at what's been happening, like now look at the Carolyn Ellison's testimony. She admitted to sending people essentially cooked books, right? The balance sheet sent. They had two sets of books. One was the actual stuff that's happening internally, which again was horribly managed. They were doing it in QuickBooks, managing this multi-billion-dollar business. And on the other hand, they had like another set of books that they were showing people, which was fraudulent, right? So that's number one, that FTX is sending all this fraudulent information, and people, including the Digital Currency Group, which is a sister company of CoinDesk. And you could say that FTX had intentionally defrauded the Digital Currency Group, Genesis, and others. But on the other hand, you see what's happening on the side of Gemini and Genesis. They knew that some of the underlying information is not true, and they still lent money. Right, there was real money. Gemini had a program called Earn, and Earn customers, like they have lost probably close to $1 billion. And this is before Genesis, which is separate from the fund that I manage, even though Genesis same name. The fund that I manage is Genesis Vault Capital, which is separate from the other Genesis group, which declared bankruptcy. The FTX was run by like amateurs, right? They were run by not professionals, people who had very little experience in finance. But if you look at Digital Currency Group, they're established finance people, and they got, they had like some inkling of some of the information presented was not true, and they still went with it, right? Their moral compass and their kind of checks and balances for being able to verify, those went out the window. So there is, you could say, oh, people make some mistakes because they didn't know, right? It's like rookie mistake. But then there is fraud, and there is, they are two separate things, right? Like rookie mistake is something that you do unknowingly, but fraud is knowingly defrauding people. And that's what is happening right now for all the people that have lost more than $1 billion at Gemini. They are now suing to be able to get that money back.
Well, Vijay, I'm glad that you delineated very clearly that you, Genesis Fall Capital, and Genesis that we're talking about in this article are two separate entities, and that you'll not be, getting cuffs put on your wrists here in the anytime future. So appreciate that. And as far as SBF and those guys, it doesn't seem like they had a lot of financial experience, but they did have a lot of experience in Adderall usage. So we've certainly determined that from the case studies. But yeah, I think this is it's just it's a black mark for DCG. It's going to be very interesting because they are huge, right? Barry Silbert is one of the kind of the grandfathers of crypto. He's been in the industry for years and years and years and years, and I mean, owning and controlling CoinDesk, DCG, Genesis, all of those entities. He's not a small player in the space. So I think I think this one is worth watching. But Mariano, Michael, I'll kick it back over to you if you have any comments on this one in particular.
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than it's nice to see these bad players get pushed out as we move into the bull run again. But there'll always be new ones, I'm sure.
There'll always be new ones. I agree with you. Nothing else to add.
Got it. Okay, so the next story, and it kind of goes back to the story we touched about before, but citing Hamas, the U.S. wants to officially treat crypto anonymity services as suspected money launderers. And I know this was kind of expected because in lieu of the article that came out last week, with a new emphasis on the Hamas attacks on Israel, the U.S. Treasury has proposed designating foreign cryptocurrency mixer services as money launderers and national security threats. Hamas attacks against Israel on October 7th have shifted the geopolitical landscape and triggered a looming Israeli ground assault on Gaza Strip. Now the ripple effects are reaching the cryptocurrency industry, where they become the U.S. Department of Treasury's rallying cry for a crackdown on cryptocurrency anonymity services, or what's known as mixers. The U.S. Treasury FinCEN today released a set of proposed rules that would designate foreign cryptocurrency mixers, which are services that blend users' digital funds to offer more anonymity and make them harder to trace, as money laundering tools that pose a threat to national security and would thus face new sanctions and regulations. Mariano, I know that you follow these types of services pretty closely. What do you think about this? I mean, are you actually surprised by this article?
First of all, huge fan of Tornado Cash. I think it's one of the best decentralized applications that I have ever seen in my life. Fantastic product. But I'm not surprised at all. So I think it comes back to the example we were talking about with BJ later, right? The technology is not good or bad. It's technology. It's lines of code. They cannot do anything, right? It's what you use that technology for, right? And with Tornado Cash and other type of mixers, you can very easily hide your wallet, hide your traceability of transactions from everyone else, which can be great. For example, if Michael owes you 10 USDC from one beer, and you don't want to tell Michael how much money you have in your wallet, right? So that's one option to do it. Or you can also, you can, if you receive funds from terrorism or from hacking an exchange, something like that, and you want to mix them to make nobody else notice, you can also use the same technology. So it's not really a matter of if the technology is inherently good or bad. It's what it's people using it for. And unfortunately, since bad people use it, right? Since terrorists and hackers and the scam of the world is using it, it gets prohibited for the rest of us, right? It's like when you were in school, and it's like if someone misbehaves, everyone gets punished. It's the unfortunate reality of that. And one thing that brings me a little bit of concern is that Vitalik Buterin said that one of the key aspects of Ethereum that it will need to be improved, it's its privacy, right? There was a paper that he released. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a proposed mechanism similar to Tornado Cash to obfuscate transactions inside Ethereum, right? So if we think about it, the same reason that Tornado Cash got banned and that apparently the United States is after this type of services, then what's going to happen with Ethereum, right? Because if this is on the Ethereum agenda, which I'm not exactly sure that it is, it's a concern, in my opinion.
Yeah,
BJ.
it sucks. The bad guys ruin it for the rest of us. Really, only the people using it for normal reasons get hurt, because ultimately the bad guys are going to use a VPN, find their way to skirt around it. So it doesn't really solve the problem in any case. It just muddies the waters more. How do you say that?
Muddies the waters more. Yeah, I
Mud-
think you got it.
it muddies up the water more and makes it real dirty.
So there is a balance between privacy and being used for illegal activities, right? So if you have cash, I can use cash. It's private. I can pay whoever I want using cash, and I can use it for both for buying, loaf of bread, or I can use it for doing some other illicit activity. But just because of what I'm using it for, doesn't make the cash as something that is inherently bad, right? So similarly in crypto, these mixer services, they provide a valuable service for privacy of transaction. And the Fourth Amendment, right? It's in the Constitution of the United States, the right to privacy, which has gone out the window without even having any discussion about it. That's a whole another discussion that we can have at some time in the future. But is the person's right to privacy just because I am wearing clothes because I want to keep my private parts private, doesn't mean I'm doing something bad, right? It doesn't mean that we should go and like ban clothes. So the FinCEN, which is the financial crimes enforcement network, they are having a rule for identifying these crypto mixing services as something that is illicit or illegal. I think that what's the old saying? You're throwing the baby out with the bath water, right? The bath water, yeah, you throw it out, but you don't have to throw out the baby. And we need to have some tools to differentiate between the baby and the bath water, metaphorically speaking, in this situation.
You never know what you're going to hear on this podcast, and what I love is when you have VJ throwing out baby in bathwater. So this is, hey, that wasn't on my bingo card for this one, but appreciate that, VJ. I love it. So we're gonna tie everything up. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below for sure. And as always, guys, let us know how we're doing. But any final takes here, and I'll throw it to whoever would like to take it first.
No final takes. On Sunday we have elections here in Argentina. Everything is super tense, but it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, Javier Milei, right? It's going to be
Javier
very
Milei.
nice. Didn't you say that you stocked up on a couple weeks worth of supplies?
2 months.
Yeah,
I
hope
have
you don't
like
go down for too
about
long.
20 tins of tuna and
Yeah.
corn and things like that, in case there are like shortages, which does happen. But yeah.
Good luck, sir.
Yeah.
On a fun note, the World Cup cricket is happening right now, and I'm obviously supporting India. And
why would you say obvious, VJ?
Because I'm originally from India, and I like the Indian cricket team, even though right now I'm a citizen of the US, and also I have ties to New Zealand, which is also another team that's playing well. This weekend is India-New Zealand match, and both the teams have not lost so far. So it's the encounter, and one of them is going to lose unless it's a tie. So that's what I'm going to be doing this weekend.
Who should we gamble for?
I don't recommend gambling.
What are the odds?
Gambling.
What are the odds in favor?
It's I support India, and India most likely has a chance to win. But this is a game where South Africa, who was playing well, and it's one of the top cricketing countries in the world, lost to Netherlands, and Netherlands is considered like a second tier team, and they lost to South Africa, which was interesting. It was a huge upset. Similarly, England, which has a very strong cricketing team and the birth nation for cricket sport as such, lost to Afghanistan, which is again another tier 2 country. So upsets can happen, but it's going to be an interesting match, and it can also almost be a finals. I think that finals or semifinals, both India and New Zealand are going to be there. So let's see.
Well, go India. All right, guys. Well, we'll give you back your week. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.